With my co-host Sidi Sise, and our guest is Honorable Usainu Dabo. Well, Mr. Dabo, before we go on the break, you were talking about the issue about trying to see how best you can revamp and upgrade the health facilities, the agriculture. I mean, we have seen recently your party have come out with a 5-point agenda that you are trying to sell out to Gambians as to what UDP intends to do if you win in December. How are you going to do this?
Well, in the first place, you have to get a team that is committed. And I think we can easily put together, a very efficient, willing, and result getter team that will do this. Of course, you know all these things would need enormous financing. And we will, of course, produce, in fact, probably within the first 3 months, we'll produce a national development plan that is saleable, that is, pragmatic in effect, and that will address this 5-point agenda, because we are going to put people first. And certainly, wherever you have a policy that puts people first, its implementation really does not meet much difficulty. And that is what we're certainly going to do. We know that with a weak economy, there are certain things that you cannot really do out of your treasury, and of course also there are certain things also that you cannot be too dependent on others.
Yeah, because I was coming to that point, because the 5-point agenda here is looking at youth employment and empowerment scheme. We have education, skills and training, nutrition, agriculture and food security, public health security, pandemic preparedness, containment and social protection, and 5, we have energy and digital infrastructure. This will require a lot of resources, Mr. Dawo.
Absolutely. It will require a lot of resources. That is why we'll come out with a national development plan, and with that, we'll be able to access sufficient funding to take care of this, to take care of this agenda that we have set for ourselves. It is not an agenda, that really is looking at cement and bricks. It is an agenda that is addressing the human being, the human capital, uplifting the livelihood, improving the living conditions of the ordinary Gambians. That is what this is aimed at. The digital infrastructure, really, in this modern age, economies, in many countries are really based, on technology. So to really get us there, to get us there will really be very easy. Let me tell you, when I was foreign minister, I had discussions with some foreign governments, Estonia in particular, and I would have thought that that government, will really have, because since we made the report, if former Vice President Fatmata Tambajang and I think we met the Prime Minister of Estonia, I would have thought that when we made the report to government, of what is being offered, what they can do, would just have really embrace them and then bring them in and then do digitization of all our activities, of all our governmental activities, and of course get the proper collection of rates and taxes through this system, and other forms of payment. Really, I think we could have done it, and build the base for it, and so you really need committed leadership why have we not been able really to collect at least 75% of the pledges in Brussels? It is because our reform program was derailed, purposely derailed, intentionally derailed.
By who and how?
By the government. Instead of focusing on the implementation of those reform programs, we are focusing on re-election. So we become preoccupied with re-election and not with the reforms. Otherwise, a cardinal pillar of our NDP is the reform of the constitution, the constitutional reform.
But in the case, will you blame the government or the parties that actually form the coalition?
How do you blame the parties that coalition? If you want to blame the parties that form the coalition, I mean, exclude UDP, we voted 100%. Talk about the other parties. We voted 100%. And I believe Doi also voted. So please do not include UDP and Doi in that categorization. Talk of the others. And indeed, a few days before the presentation of that bill to the National Assembly, formal presentation, the President had occasion to address the National Assembly, what they call the State Opening of Parliament. That was a perfect opportunity for the President to address the members of the National Assembly and tell them of the importance of this bill, that they must all vote for it, that this is the bill, the passing of that bill really be something to the credit of the National Assembly itself, that they are partnering the government of the Gambia in ensuring that a new constitution comes into force. But he never mentioned it. He just casual mention. For me, as far as I was president, I would dwell on that more, dwell on that more, and ask them to really vote for it. So, please, maybe in future, all for you and all media houses, when I say the coalition parties, exclude UDP, exclude Doi, because we voted for it, we wanted it.
And are you disappointed that it didn't go through?
Were
you disappointed that it didn't go through?
Well, I wasn't disappointed because I had heard some people who are close to the president in their radio talk shows and interviews with some media houses saying that this constitution is bad, we don't want it. We don't want it. So even if National Assembly passes it, we are going to campaign against it. We have heard that. So it didn't disappoint. So I wasn't disappointed.
Do you think there's a chance to bring it back from your own legal point of view as a legal expert and
Well, not for this year, but I think certainly it can come back, and it should come back. It should come back because that is what the Gambian people want, and let it go to the National Assembly. Let the National Assembly do what they think they can do with it, and then submit to the Gambian people. Let the Gambian people say, yes, this is the law we want for ourselves. This is the constitution we want for ourselves. And if the Gambian people reject it, then no one would take blame for it. It would be the Gambian people who would take blame for it.
Mr. Dabo, you talked about NDP, that UDP government in office in 3 months will come with an NDP, a National Development Program. We had you, when you were in government, you talked about defending the NDP that the present government have. Is that not a shift or contradiction here?
It's not a contradiction.
Because you stood...
After all, the NDP has a lifespan. So if it expires, you just have a new one. It has a lifespan. So there is no contradiction. And indeed, people, again, this is the misconception. Supporting government policy, such as the NDP, is different from supporting President Adama Barrow in his political enterprise. They are different, completely different. They are not the same.
You did mention President Barrow's name when you mentioned NDP in Gunjur rally.
Yes, because when in Gunjur rally, if I did mention his name, I must have mentioned his name because he is president.
You said President Barrow's NDP.
Yes, of course. I mean, that is a political parlance. You know, you say that this is the Barrow Constitution. You know, I mean that doesn't add anything to it. Yeah, it doesn't add anything to it.
You did talked about UDP did supported the constitution in parliament. They voted in favor of it, but you did fire at least 8 MPs from your party who voted against. With hindsight, you think that was the right thing to do? If they were still in your camp, would they still vote against the constitution?
Well, I think they would still vote against the constitution because we cut off the cancer. We didn't want the cancerous thing to contribute to be infesting us. So, and that would have been even more embarrassing. They would because they would still vote against. They would still vote against us, and that would be very embarrassing to UDP.
I heard you use a Mandinka phrase here, and excuse me to use a Mandinka phrase here. Would we say UDP was fanjano for the 2020 draft constitution by firing your people?
It's not fanjano because if you say fanjano, it will mean that this is UDP's baby. And it's not UDP's baby.
But you were very passionate about the draft constitution.
Of course, we should be passionate about it.
That's what you always call for.
It is, we should be passionate about it, but that does not make it our baby. That's why no member of our UDP National Assembly member introduced the bill. That is why the Attorney General came and presented the bill. It was a government measure. But of course, as you say, Fanjano, just as you are saying Fanjano, a lot of other people outside there thought that UDP la fengleti. When in fact it was not UDP's. This was the government, in fact, the government of the Gambia under President Adama Barrow. His cabinet decided that we'll present this measure to the National Assembly for their approval.
So is it because we don't take ownership of this draft as Gambians?
No, you could only take ownership of it as Gambians if it reaches at the referendum stage.
But these representatives were ours.
These representatives were ours, but the truth is that if these representatives were ours and they are the ones who are to take ownership of it, there wouldn't have been the need to go a step further. It would just have stopped as any other legislation. The National Assembly passes, we give it to the President to assent. But this one goes beyond that. It goes to say that even if the National Assembly adopts this, let it be submitted to the
That's the legal technicalities.
Well, it's a question of ownership. It's a question, because it's just not a legal technical, because essentially constitutions are political documents couched in legal languages. So the ownership of this constitution is in the Gambian people. That is why the Constitutional Review Commission went out and consulted extensively, very widely. Yeah? I mean, how many bills have been presented to the National Assembly that has received such respect from the promoters going around the country? The only one I think I can think of is the elections bill. Other than that, they present bills to the National Assembly, and it's voted by the members of the National Assembly and then given to the President for assent. So ownership really is not in the National Assembly. For me, it's in the electorate.
Were expelled by the party. I mean, will you accept them if they take a U-turn and want to return home?
Will you accept them coming back?
Will you accept them if they take a U-turn and say, let's go back home?
Well, I mean, you take back prodigal sons, but when they are not prodigal sons, we don't take back home. See, politics, there must be this issue. That's what I was telling. I had earlier said, you do not look at a political advantage. If all of them were to come back and accept that, we are taking a political advantage. And then we'll be deviating from our principles. Have they been cured of the cancer that led us to exercise them? No.
Can you give description of this cancer? I think it will be important to know.
The description of this cancer, the cancer is in your body and eating you. So